What is good, everybody? Hello. Happy Monday. It is Momentum Monday. We just had a really cool virtual conference. This is, look, RBG. I don't know if you can see it, but it says fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that others will join you. So that's what it says. So all festive, and it relates to what I want to share today, which is where are the safe places? I feel like we live in a world that it's frankly hard enough as it is to be vulnerable, to do the soul work, to look within, to find places where you can heal and deal with your thought life, your mental health, your emotional health. And it's something that as the world becomes darker, or we're in the last days, so to speak, that it's harder and harder to find those safe spaces to go to. And it's so important. So we were having a anti-racist conversation and really just reflecting on how revolutionary it is to practice self-love. That's revolutionary. A lot of racism and a lot of not being able to address a race pandemic that's literally happening in the world right now in the midst of a health pandemic is hate, and self-hate is often the root of that, right? And you can't really love yourself when you can't view your brother or sister as yourself, when you can't really allow yourself to feel and to care about things that we all are facing. It's all of our issue, right? So it's really interesting to have a practice of inner truth telling and radical honesty, and really interrogating thoughts or perspectives that you have that really might not be serving you or the world, and also how to really critique yourself and actively challenge yourself and go on a different journey because of that. So today I want to talk about building emotional security and stability because these spaces are diminishing. So how can you, in the midst of that very real reality that's out in the world, how can you develop, right? That is never an excuse. In fact, that's just a reason to turn it up even more. But you've got to know how to do that for yourself, how to practice the self-critique without being super introspective and without being, without hating on yourself. There's no guilt, shame, and condemnation that we're going after here, but it's seriously examining what's going on in you, because ultimately that's going to come out of you. And you might think that you're being loving, but some of the ways that you show up might not be loving. So we all have blind spots. We're all flawed, right? But how can you practice this work? How can you find a space to help you practice this work? How can you find community, get rooted in? What can you practice at least every day to have a sense of emotional stability and security in these times? So I'm going to talk about at least 3 things. I could probably go on for a minute, but these are things that you can consciously be aware of really what you can examine, of what you can self-check, and where you can do some work. Okay. So as far as I see it, the only foundation for human security, stability, happiness is this place within, this place where God transforms us radically from the inside out. This is a job that I personally can't do by myself. This is a job that if I could have, I would have, but I could not do the depth of the work that I'm doing today without God. And I really don't believe that people can. So here it is. We've got to go within to actually find the quality of life that we deserve, because prosperity is far greater than what we see out in the world. It is an inner thing first, an inner experience first. So how can you deal with the drama, with the tension in your life, and really embrace stability, calm, peace, contentment? Here's 3 things. Number 1, never compare yourself. Never compare yourself. Honestly, you don't need to. A lot of broken consciousness, a lot of limited thinking, a lot of living beneath the very reason that we've been put on this earth for, a lot of not being able to embrace our own uniqueness and rock that in the world is because of comparison. So never compare yourself, right? It really is diminishing our self-perspective, because society is set up to get you to do that, to start working against yourself, to try to change yourself so that you'll never be enough, you'll never be worthy, right? And then you can't live out your full potential if you are living that way. You can't work against yourself and then live out your full potential at the same time. You can't do that. So it's deciding that I'm not going to compare, right? I am only going to look at what my purpose is, right? What I am here to do, and I'm going to focus on that and move forward with that one day at a time, one moment at a time, right? Because a lot of times we have these, what am I going to call them? I think online, what I've noticed personally, and I've actually been, I think if you've ever been in an unhealthy situation and smiled through it, there's this sense of being an imposter. There's this sense of like a false positive, right? So you could take this photo and then like behind the scenes, you're actually miserable. You actually don't know if you want to be in that relationship. You actually just found out some really bad news, but you want to project this picture to the world that you've got it together and everything's perfect. And I actually was raised in a family like that. It looked very manicured on the outside, like lived in the country. We were in Girl Scouts. Our parents were in the medical field. Like it looked really, really good, right? But it was a hot freaking mess. So I have found that the more manicured it is, the more I'm like, something ain't right here, right? Because I know how much work that takes. And I know ultimately what's going on behind the scenes, right? To make that happen. So at any rate, a lot of what we see in the world is a false positive. So there's like, as a photo and behind the scenes, it's just straight up misery. Like we have no clue what is going on in somebody's mental health, their emotional state, the type of relationships they're in, what they're facing in their life, their health. Like we have no idea what somebody is facing, right? We don't know what keeps them up at night, but yet we want to compare ourselves to ultimately a picture or a false positive. And we want to compare our lives to what we see on TV or to magazines that we see in the checkout line or whatever it is, to even people that are close to us or, you know, within 6 degrees of separation. But where has that ever gotten you? Has that ever motivated you? And is it getting you closer to the call and the purpose that's on your life? Or is it actually distracting you and pulling you away from that? So don't compare. Measure your standard against, are you living the truth? How close are you every day to living the truth of your life? That's the standard. You don't want to compare yourself to anything outside of you. How are you living against the truth in your life? How does your behavior look? How is your thought life, right? You measure that. You don't need to look outside of you to see how you're doing. Okay. So again, another thought, prosperity transcends money. If I didn't say that before, that's what I meant. So you really limit the comparison game when you focus all of your energy on purpose and really training yourself to walk in peace, to embrace the joy of the Lord that is your strength, to really train to be happy on purpose. Okay. That's how you can really quit comparison, because that takes all of your energy. You literally have no time to compare when you're focused on purpose. You just don't. Okay. Number 2, this one is kind of like a loaded one, but don't complain is like the main heading, but don't fill in the gap for others. And also don't make assumptions. Okay. Because we know what assumptions make us. They make a out of you and me, right? First part there. So don't complain, because the reality of this one, what you really need to know, or what you need to let hit your spirit, is that words, what we're speaking out of our mouth, create worlds. What we are speaking out of our mouth is what we're inviting into our reality. It's literally, we're manifesting all the time, but we are literally saying, hey, I want more of that in my life. So the more you're broadcasting negativity, the more you're complaining about things, the more you're making excuses, the more you're telling a victim story or a victim narrative, really the further you're getting from having your hero's journey, from finding the allies that are on your path, from coming up with solutions, from really being busy about what you're actually here to do. You literally separate yourself from that. You just literally block all of the goodness that's flowing to you from getting to you. You literally repel it. So keep that in mind when you have a mouth that just tends to run for no reason. Okay. And often what we can do too is, this goes along with comparison, but We fill in gaps for other people. It's weird, but do it. Like if you are just people watching, check it out. You will look at that person, study that person, and suddenly you've just defined their whole life story. You don't even know who they are, right? Or we make assumptions that they are where they are because they did X, Y, or Z, right? But we really don't know that. And since when were you the expert in somebody else's life? You ain't got time for that. Like that takes up so much energy. So don't complain. And with the comparison game, don't fill in the gap for others and don't make assumptions. Okay. So really think about what you want, your imagination, your creative power, the life force that is in you. What do you want that flowing towards? Just think about it. Okay. And lastly, number 3, don't compete. Okay. So this is all about rocking your own uniqueness. Literally nobody is made like you. Nobody is wired like you. Nobody. Okay. But a lot of times what we do is we try to copy or follow formulas, but that's not it, right? Particularly on a faith journey, you usually only see the next step. Okay. There's not always a formula. And just because somebody did it that way doesn't mean that this is your path. Somebody else's path, particularly somebody that's not walking with God, might look like this. Now your journey might look like this, but you chose to walk with God. And the piece of alignment is the safest place to be. Okay. So you are an original, not a copy. Compete with the best version of yourself that you see in your mind, right? A lot of times we have glimpses of who we were put on this earth to be. Before you were born, God knew you. He formed you, right? He ordained you. He created you to be on the earth for such a time as this, right? You want to be busy about that. You want glimpses of that. You want to co-create with God to bring that version of yourself into the world every day. Okay. And that will require all of you, meaning you don't have time to look left and look right and get caught up in what other people are doing. In fact, you are busy about serving in your own lane. Okay. You don't have time to be jealous and you don't have time to be intimidated by everybody else. You don't. Like when you're not competing, those things go away and you actually have more space to celebrate people, and you likely have a understanding of how much it actually takes to show up and be authentic, to show up and be vulnerable, to show up and be on this journey. So those are the things. Do not compare yourself. Do not complain, and do not compete. What these will do is they will help stabilize you, because all of that, those are all really destabilizing. Right? Like they take a ton of emotional energy to move through. They make us feel unstable. Like if we're complaining, if we're comparing, if we're competing, we are literally deflating ourselves. We're just letting energy and life force get sucked out of us, right? When you want to be building yourself up in God so that you can release that or unleash it in the world, right? So you can't really do both. So you have to decide what you're about and be busy about it. Okay? So if you want more peace and security and stability in your life, the main theme here is it's not going to come from looking outside of you. It comes from an inner journey. Okay. So where are the safe places? Well, recognize that there aren't a lot of them, but the more you create that safe space within yourself, the more you can recognize what's safe for you and what's not. And that's the first place to start. Okay. All right, guys, I hope this message blessed you. If this work is important to you and you're really on an inner journey and you really want more, but you're not quite sure where to start, visit julianapage.com. There's a lot of coaching packages over there to choose from, and also a self-mastery course, which is very helpful. I also have several books on growing and maturing in God, so you can go check those out over on julianapage.com. And then you can also tune into the Spirit-Filled Real Talk podcast. It is every Saturday, and it's available on Spotify and the Apple Podcast app, I believe. All right, guys. Yes, the podcast app. All right, guys, until next time, stay blessed.